So let's look at this case. You have a polynomial p of degree at most d, right? Degree equal to d. Okay, where the polynomial p is you can write it in this following way. So you have x1, x2 up till xn, and the polynomial is just summation ci x1 to the alpha I1 x2 to the alpha I2 and so on till xn to the alpha in, right? So these are this is the way in which you can write this polynomial. So this term here, right? This is what is known as a monomial, right? This is a monomial, right? And when you say the degree is d, it means that these values alpha I1 plus alpha I2 and so on till alpha In is at most d, right? That's what it means to say that this polynomial is of degree d, right? The sum of the degrees of the individual variables, you add them up, then the sum will be at most d, right? And ci is the corresponding coefficient, right? This is the coefficient. This is a real number. Okay. So now the polynomial identity testing problem, you're given this polynomial p, and you're given the polynomial p. The polynomial is given, say, as a program, okay, a computer program. So you can see the code which is supposedly computing p, and what you want to do is the following. You want to check if p is identically 0. Right? Whether indeed p evaluates to 0 on every point, it also is equivalent to saying that all the coefficients of the monomials, every monomial, the coefficient is 0, right? It's actually equal to 0, right? And the most straightforward way, as we discussed last time, was to actually expand out the polynomial, right? You just expand out the polynomial completely, and then you see whether it is indeed all zeros, right? And that is what we observed was that is not efficient, because the number of monomials is something like n plus d minus 1 choose d. Okay, this can be very large if compared to n and d, right? So you don't want to expand out the polynomial completely, but yet you want to check whether this polynomial is identically 0 or not. Okay. So is this problem clear, the polynomial identity testing problem? So in the case of the toy example, what you had was a univariate polynomial, and what you have here is a multivariate polynomial. And in the case of the toy example, you wanted to check whether that univariate polynomial, which was px minus qx, was identically 0. And here you want to check whether this multivariate polynomial is identically 0 or not. Right? So this is the polynomial identity testing question, and it's a very important question for multiple reasons, right? So the first interesting point to note is that there is no known deterministic polytime algorithm for this problem. For PIT. Right? So if you're given, so what does it mean to say a deterministic polytime algorithm? So the input here is the program that computes P. That program can become very small compared to the number of monomials in the polynomial, right? So you want an algorithm whose running time is polynomial in the size of the program that computes P, right? So the program that computes P can be very small, exponentially small compared to the actual explicit representation of the polynomial P, right? That is what makes this problem very hard to solve. And currently, we don't know any deterministic polytime algorithm for this problem, right? And what we're going to see is a very simple randomized algorithm for this problem, right? The second interesting reason why this problem is interesting, right? Second reason is that if you obtain an efficient deterministic algorithm for PIT, then that would imply that there is no efficient algorithm for some other problem. It's a fixed problem, some other fixed problem. So if you can actually come up with this algorithm for PIT, then you will end up also showing that there is this other problem. It's not important what that problem is, but in fact, a whole bunch of problems, right? You will end up showing that those other problems does not have an efficient algorithm, right? So typically, it's much harder. It is we feel that it is much harder to show that there is no efficient algorithm for a problem, right? Because what you need to show is that no matter how clever you are in your design of the algorithm, there is no way that you can get an efficient algorithm, a polynomial time algorithm. That's what you want to prove if you want to show that there is no efficient algorithm for a problem. And that seems hard, right? Because you need to argue against all possible approaches, all possible algorithms. Whereas intuitively, it seems easier to design a efficient algorithm, right? As compared to proving that there is no efficient algorithm. So this basically connects the two together. It tells you that, the seemingly easy thing of coming up with an efficient algorithm for PIT is also sufficient to prove that there is no efficient algorithm for some other problem, right? So that way, this problem is very interesting. Okay. And thirdly, so you might think that, maybe like you can go about trying to design efficient algorithm for PIT to show lower bounds and show that there is no efficient algorithm for some other problems. But then the connection also goes the other way, right? So if, in fact, it's not exactly the same, but it goes the other way. Okay. If, if you prove that there is a certain problem for which there is no efficient algorithm, then it will also imply that PIT has an efficient deterministic algorithm. So in some sense, there is this if and only if condition which says that if you define PIT has an efficient deterministic algorithm, if and only if some other problem does not have an efficient algorithm, deterministic algorithm, right? So that way, PIT is a very central problem in an area known as complexity theory, right? So there is a tremendous amount of work that has been done to, understand PIT and to design efficient deterministic algorithms for PIT. Right? We haven't made much progress on this. We know efficient algorithms for PIT when the programs are of certain types and so on. But otherwise, it's a very important open problem in complexity theory, which has a lot of connections with a lot of other things. Right? So it's a very central question, right? This question of PIT. What we are going to show is that it has a very, very simple randomized algorithm. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll see the randomized algorithm and we'll try to analyze this randomized algorithm. And while we analyze the randomized algorithm, we'll basically recall the basic concepts in discrete probability, which you have already seen before, but we'll just recall all of them while we analyze the randomized PIT algorithm. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next. Any questions so far? Yeah. Do we know the degree of the unknown polynomial? Yes, yes. So it's that is also given to you. Yeah, you have the program, and you know that it is computing some polynomial of yeah. You can say you'll know that looking at the program is such that looking at the program you can get a upper bound on the degree. Okay, these are very special kinds of programs. So you know the degree. You can say that you know the upper bound on the degree of the polynomial. Right. Any other questions? Okay. So let's look at this randomized algorithm for PIT. Okay, and what is really interesting about this randomized algorithm is that this randomized algorithm is exactly the same algorithm that we saw for the univariate case. Okay, so the randomized algorithm is just the following. Okay, so the randomized algorithm for PIT is the following. Okay, choose values a1, a2, and so on till an from a set S. Okay, so say S is the set from 1 to till 100D again. So now you choose n points from S uniformly at random. Uniformly at random with replacement. What does that mean? It means that the same element can be picked multiple times, right? So you pick, so think of like there is a bag in which you have numbers 1 till 100D. You first take a ball and look at the value. That value is assigned to the variable that is A1. Then you put the ball back into the bag, pick another ball uniformly at random, and so on. Okay. So you're going to choose n elements uniformly at random from the set S with replacement. What it means that if you take one, say the first time you pick the first element A1 and they say A1 turns out to be 1, then A2 also can maybe turn out to be 1, right? That's what it means to say that choose these elements uniformly at random with replacement. Okay. And then what you do is you evaluate the polynomial. You check if P of A1, A2 up till AN is 0 or not. If it is 0, then you say P is identically 0. Else, you say that P is not identically 0. Okay. It's the same algorithm as we saw for the univariate case, just that instead of picking one element from S, you pick n elements to assign to the n variables in P. And then you just evaluate the polynomial once again, the same way. Okay, and you check whether the evaluation turns out to be 0 or not. If it is 0, you say that it is the identically 0 polynomial. Otherwise, you say it's not. Okay. The same algorithm. Is the algorithm clear? Right. And it turns out that the guarantee of this algorithm is also identical to the algorithm for the univariate case. Okay. So what it means is that if P is identically 0, then, so let's call this algorithm A. Okay. So then the probability that A says P is identically equal to 0, this is equal to 1, right? There is no error at this point. If you have the algorithm A, if P is identically equal to 0, then irrespective of which point on which you evaluate it, you will get the value 0. So there is no error in the algorithm, right? And if P is not identically equal to 0, then the probability that A says P is identically equal to 0 is at most 1 over 100, right? The same sort of guarantee that we had for the toy example works here as well, right? And our goal is to actually prove this. Okay? Prove these guarantees. Why is this true? That's what we want to do. Okay? Any questions so far? So we say we want a deterministic polytime algorithm, right? So we say there is no deterministic algorithm for PIT because there is no deterministic way for coming up with endpoints such that the polynomial is non-zero. Well, it depends, right? I mean, in the sense, what I want to say is, if in the case of real value, so you can have a deterministic algorithm. It need not be very efficient. That's all that I'm saying. What you want is also an efficient algorithm, right? You could always, maybe try out different set of points. You can try out all possible combinations and different n tuples and see what evaluates to 0 or not, and so on. But what I want to say is that there is no efficient deterministic algorithm, right? That is what is being claimed. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Can the program length be less than order n? No, it is not. It will not be less than order n. It will be right. So the number of variables is the program length is greater than the number of variables. Okay. Also, this is not an arbitrary program. It's a very special kind of program. So it can do only a few certain types of operations and so on. Okay. So if you want to look at it, it's what is known as an algebraic circuit. Okay, so if you want to check it up, the term such programs are called algebraic circuits. Okay. And what you have is actually a program is actually an algebraic circuit that is supposedly computing the polynomial, and you want to check whether this polynomial is identically zero. Okay. Algebraic circuit is like a Boolean circuit, just that the gates instead of being or and are now addition and multiplication. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So before we get into an analysis of this algorithm, we'll see a seemingly different looking problem, which somehow has a solution that somehow has a solution which is obtained using identity testing. Okay? So this is a problem which some of you might have seen before. This is about finding perfect matchings in graphs.
Sir, just a small doubt.
Yeah.
In PIT, the degree can be exponential in is it?
No, the degree will be so it can be quite large. Yeah, it can be actually be quite large. You can have small sized. It can be exponential in n also. You can have a small sized what is known as an algebraic circuit where you can just keep doubling the degrees so that within a small size you can get very large degree polynomials. Yeah, they can be huge.
Okay.
Oh, wait, just a minute. So in our case, we'll say that, yeah, so in general, it can be very large. But yeah, in general, it can be very large. But we will look at the case when D is not too large, right? If the D is very large and already, then it's very difficult to solve it anyway, right? So D we'll assume is currently polynomial in it. Okay.
Sir, in that case, you can just test for D plus 1 points. And if all of them are 0, it must be identically 0. Otherwise, it must be...
No, but D plus 1 points, but so you want... but it's a multivariate polynomial now, right? So which D plus 1 points for which variables will you assign them?
D plus 1 points in n-dimensional space.
So you'll have n to the
D.
D.
Be polynomial in assuming D is polynomial.
No, but D, you choose D plus 1 points, okay? And then how do you assign to x1 to xn? What is the assignment that you will give to the variables?
No, I'm choosing D plus 1 points in n-dimensional space. So I'll have...
but that is a lot, no? And then what will you do? But you need to prove something similar, right? I mean, why will that work?
Because like a degree n polynomial can have at least at most
so multivariate polynomials, it's slightly different, right? I mean, these are multivariate polynomial now. So it's possible that the roots, these can behave in very strange ways. Multivariate polynomials don't behave very nicely when you compare to the univariate case. You don't have that sort of the fundamental theorem of algebra, similar thing, you cannot write it down here.
Oh, okay.
So you're going to prove something very similar. You're going to generalize the fundamental theorem of algebra, but in fact, understanding the roots of multivariate polynomials is a very, very deep field of mathematics. It's known as algebraic geometry, right? There's a lot of work that has been gone on to studying the roots of multivariate polynomials also, right? So we don't know a lot of, we don't have the sort of nice results like that, but it's a very vast area of study.
Okay. So like it can be, like there can be more than
yeah, there can be lot of roots, yeah. Right. Okay. So what do I want to say now? So yeah. So Yeah, so let's before we get into the proof of this statement, let's go back to this perfect. Let's go to a problem which is related to PIT, but not seemingly so, right? Okay. So let's look at this problem, which is about finding perfect matchings in graphs. Okay. So what is this problem? So what is so you have a graph G, right? And matching, right? A matching is a set M subset of edges, right? Such that no two edges in M share an edge, or share a vertex. Right? So for instance, if you have a graph, say a very simple 4 cycle, right? So this is one matching, right? These two edges, the shaded edges, they don't share a vertex, so that is a matching, right? Similarly, these two are this green, these two pair of edges also is a matching, right? Because they don't share a vertex. Okay? And a perfect matching M is a matching where every vertex is mapped to some matched to some other vertex. Right? So matching is basically an assignment of one vertex to another vertex, right? So in this case, here for this violet thing, so you have this vertex and this vertex are matched, right? And this this vertex and this vertex are matched, right? So a matching is one where each vertex is matched to another vertex, and a perfect matching is one where every vertex is matched to some other vertex. Right? It's a matching where every vertex is matched to some other vertex. Okay. Now it's a matching arises in many different scenarios. When for a very many different types of problems, you can reduce a lot of computational problems to some problem related to matching. Right? So matchings is a problem that has been really well studied in computer science and graph theory. Right? And what we're interested in is this following problem. So you're given a bipartite graph G, okay, with two vertices at L, R, and E, such that the number of vertices on the left side is equal to the number of vertices on the right side. And you want to check if G has a perfect matching. Okay. So what does that mean? It means that you have this graph. Okay. This is L, this is R, and the edges are all between the left half and the right half. Okay. And you want a perfect matching, which means that every vertex has to be mapped to some other vertex on the other side. Right? You want to check whether this graph contains a perfect matching or not. Right? It's an algorithmic question, right? In the sense you're given the graph G with n vertices. So let's say this is equal to n, right? Left side and right side have n vertices each. And you want an algorithm that will return yes if G contains a perfect matching or not. Okay. Is the problem clear? Perfect matching? If you have not seen it before, if you have any doubt, just let me know, right? Okay. So you want to check whether G has a perfect matching or not. Now, many algorithms are known for this, right? I mean, it's very well studied problem. In fact, the problem of computing matchings, maximum matchings in graphs is one of the first papers where the notion of polynomial time as corresponding to efficiency was first, defined, explained, right? It's a very famous paper of Edmonds, right? About finding a polynomial time for maximum matching, where this idea of efficiency is equal to poly time was first explained. So it's a central question that way. Okay, and a lot of algorithms. So there is Edmonds algorithm, and there are a lot of other algorithms known, which are very beautiful algorithm, which uses very nice combinatorial ideas about graphs, about matchings, and so on. Okay, what we will see is a very simple randomized algorithm for this problem, which is going to use PIT as some sort of a black box. So to do that, okay, let's given this graph G, let's define a matrix. Okay, sorry. So let's define this matrix P, okay, as follows. So the entries of P is going to be either some variables or 0. Okay, so we'll say that P of ij, I comma j, is xij if the edge I comma j is in the graph and it is 0 otherwise. Right? So for every edge, you have this. So this matrix P is an n cross n matrix. Okay, so P is this matrix where the left side you have rows indexed by L, and then you have the columns indexed by R. Okay, and an entry here, say this is row I and column J. You put a value xij if ij is an edge in the graph. Okay, otherwise you put a 0. Okay, maybe some edges are 0 and some are these variables. Okay, this matrix, this is known as Edmonds matrix. Okay, is this clear? Is this matrix clear? How we obtain this matrix on the graph? Right, it's very similar to what the bipartite adjacency matrix, just that you replace the one by a variable. Okay, right? So now, given this matrix, so it's a square matrix, n cross n matrix, you can look at the determinant of this matrix. Okay, let's look at the determinant of this matrix P. How do you define the determinant? Right, so the determinant is obtained as follows, right? So it's a summation over all permutations pi, okay, or bijection. So Sn is the set of bijections from the set n to n, okay, or set 1, 2 up till n. Okay, so permutation is basically such a bijection. Look at all such bijections, right? And the determinant is nothing but -1 to the a quantity known as sine of pi, which I'll define now. So, and it's product of P of I comma pi I. Okay. This quantity here, which is known as sine of pi, is nothing but the parity of the number of inversions of pi. Okay. So what is the inversions of pi? So what does it mean to, what is an inversion in a permutation pi? So an inversion is nothing but a pair I comma j such that I is less than j and pi of I is greater than pi of j. Right? So for instance, if say you look at, say n is equal to 3, right? And a possible bijection is the following, right? So pi of 1 is equal to 1, pi of 2 is equal to 3, pi of 3 is equal to 2. Okay, so this is one bijection, correct? How many inversions are there in this bijection? Right, there is one inversion in this bijection. So if you look at this, right, this is an inversion, right? Because if you take the pair 2 comma 3, then 2 is less than 3, but pi of 2 is 3, which is greater than 2, which is equal to pi of 3, right? So 2 is less than 3, but pi of 2 is greater than pi of 3. So this is one inversion, right? Are there any other inversions? So what are the other pairs that are there in this permutation? That you can have 1, 2 or 1, 3, right? But 1, 2 is not a inversion because pi of 1 is 1, which is less than pi of 2, which is 2, which is 3, right? Similarly, 1, 3, pi of 1 is 1, which is less than pi of 3, which is 2, right? So there is only one inversion in this permutation, which is the pair 2, 3. Therefore, for this particular example, sine of this pi is equal to 1, right? It's a parity. So it's odd. Parity is basically whether the number of inversions is odd or even. In this case, it's odd, so it is 1. If it is even, it is 0. Sine of pi is 0. Right? So this is the definition of the determinant of the matrix, right? You know, you have probably used this determinant in multiple places, right? When you want to solve linear equations and so on, determinant is something that keeps coming up, right? Is this clear? Any questions at this point? Right? So what is, so let's look at our P, right? In our case, the P is basically a matrix which has some value 0, some values as xij, right? So in our case, this determinant is actually a polynomial, right? Determinant of P is a polynomial on the variables xij's. Right? Because this thing here, this can be something like product of xij's, right? It's either product of xij's or 0, right? It's one of those two. So you can think of the determinant as a polynomial over the variables xij. What is the degree of this polynomial? What can you say about the degree of this polynomial? N, yeah, right? The degree of the polynomial is n because, right, in every term, every monomial, so this is the monomial of this polynomial, right? This quantity here is the monomial of this polynomial. And your each entry Pij is one variable and you're multiplying n variables and there is no exponent for any of the variables, right? So the degree of this polynomial is n, right? So the degree of the polynomial is n, okay? Any questions so far? And if you actually notice carefully, right, you will see this following, you can observe the following, right? So this is a small lemma, we'll write it as a small lemma. Determinant, determinant of P is identically 0 if and only if G has no perfect matching. Okay. So this polynomial that we have just constructed, the determinant polynomial obtained from the Edmonds matrix, is identically 0 if and only if G has no perfect matching. Why is that? See, let's look at the determinant, right? Let's look at the determinant of P. This is summation pi in Sn minus 1 to the sine of pi, product of P I comma pi I, right? So what are these monomials actually, right? So it's basically mapping. So you can, another way to write this is basically summation pi element of Sn. A non-zero monomial of this polynomial would look like this. It is something like xi comma pi I going from 1 to n, right? This is actually what the polynomial will look like. Correct? So each I is mapped to some pi I. And since pi is a so when is x when do you have a term like this? It's only when there is an edge between I and pi of I, right? This happens only when there is an edge. Otherwise, this term would have been 0 and this monomial would not have existed. The fact that a monomial existed is because you have the set of pair, you have a collection of pairs I comma pi I, where I comma pi I is an edge in the graph, right? And since pi is a bijection, the pair I comma pi I, they form a perfect matching, right? So the monomials of this polynomial correspond to perfect matchings in the graph, right? Is that clear? Any questions on this? Is it clear why this monomials correspond to perfect matchings? Okay. So the only bad thing that can happen is the following. The only bad thing that can happen is maybe can there be cancellations because of this factor here, right? Because some of the terms are positive, some of the terms are negative. Can there be cancellations? Is that possible? Right? Maybe there are some monomials, but is it possible that G has a perfect matchings, but determinant P is identically 0 because some of these monomials cancel off? Why won't that happen? Can someone tell me? Or is that possible? Do you think that is possible?
Sir, like if it has to cancel, it has to be the same permutation then.
Exactly, right? The only way you can cancel off one matching is if it has to occur again, right? If you take two distinct perfect matchings, then the monomials are distinct, right? So the monomials corresponding to distinct perfect matchings are different, right? So there is no way for you to actually for those monomials to cancel off, right? So therefore, this determinant P is identically 0 if and only if G has no perfect matching, right? And now this gives you the algorithm, right? So now you have converted the problem of computing, checking whether a graph has a perfect matching to a question about polynomial identity testing, right? Because you have a matrix P with variable entries in it and some of the entries being 0. And you want to check whether the determinant of this matrix is an identically 0 polynomial or not. So what do? You just evaluate this polynomial and randomly chosen points and check whether the determinant is actually 0 or not, right? And you know how to evaluate determinants. That is something that can be done efficiently. If you're given integer values, say for the entries in the matrix, then you can actually compute this determinant efficiently. Right? So you just take the graph, construct the Edmonds matrix, and then you just evaluate the determinant on randomly chosen points, and you check whether it evaluates to 0 or not. If it does not evaluate to 0, then you know that G has a perfect matching. And if it evaluates to 0, you say that G has no perfect matchings, but you could possibly be wrong, right? Because it need not be identically 0, and yet it can evaluate to 0 at the points that you have chosen. But in any case, it's a randomized algorithm with the same guarantee as we saw for the polynomial identity testing problem, right? So even though the algorithms that you may have seen for perfect matching are the algorithms that at least I know for perfect matchings are fairly complicated. They're not very easy algorithms. But here you have just reduced everything to just computing a determinant. Correct? So perfect matching is a very simple randomized algorithm. Okay? Via PID. Any questions on this reduction, this algorithm for perfect matching? Any questions so far? Okay. So that is one thing. So there is a slight aside that I want to mention. So corresponding to the matrix P, you have another quantity. Okay, so here is this is the permanent. This is the determinant of the matrix. There is something known as the permanent of a matrix. So the permanent of P. Okay. So the permanent of P is defined as follows. It's very similar to the determinant, except that this term here will be missing. Okay, so the permanent of P is summation pi in Sn product of Pi comma pi I, where I goes from 1 to n, right? So there is no term related to the sign of the permutation, right? It's just the sum. Okay. Correct. So in this example related to the perfect matchings, what do you think the permanent is actually computing? For this Edmonds matrix, if you can compute permanent, what can you compute? What, right? Determinant was related to checking for the existence of perfect matchings. What about the permanent?
Maybe like the number of perfect matchings.
Exactly, right? So if you could compute the permanent, this is basically looking at counting the number of perfect matchings. Right? Because if you can compute the permanent, then all you need to do is to assign some one, say value 1 to all the variables. And then what you have is the number of perfect matchings in this graph. Right? And it turns out that while determinant is a very simple quantity to compute, permanent is incredibly hard to compute. We don't know of any efficient algorithm to compute permanent. Okay. So that -1 to the sin pi plays a very crucial role in some sense. Right? We don't know how to compute the permanent of an integer matrix. We don't know of any efficient algorithm. The problem is computationally so hard that even if you were to actually prove P is equal to NP, even then it is possible that there is no efficient algorithm for the computing the permanent of the matrix. Right? So it's much harder problem than even NP, right? Satisfiability and so on. It's much harder than that. So while finding a perfect matching is checking whether the graph has a perfect matching and computing a perfect matching is a very simple problem computationally. Counting the number of perfect matchings even for bipartite graphs turns out to be a very hard problem, right? Computationally. And so in this course, later on in this course, we'll actually see an algorithm that will approximate this quantity. Okay, we will actually see how to approximately count the number of perfect matchings. It will be a randomized algorithm. And it's a very famous algorithm. It was a breakthrough result which came about some 20 years back, right? Which uses some very nice ideas, and it's a randomized algorithm. We don't know of any deterministic algorithm for approximately counting the number of perfect matchings, but we'll see a randomized algorithm for it. Okay. Any questions so far? I think this was just a digression relating to telling you why PIT is an interesting question, right? It has connections to various other problems which look seemingly different from PIT, but yet which can be reduced to PIT. Any questions so far? Okay. So then let's go back to PIT. Okay. So we had this algorithm, right? We had an algorithm for PIT that we wanted to analyze. The algorithm was written here, right? The algorithm is that you'll choose a set of points and then you will evaluate the points and check whether it is 0 or not. Okay. And we want to analyze this algorithm. We want to prove these two statements about the algorithm. Okay. And the analysis is basically the algorithm itself is, in fact, it's a statement. It's a lemma. We'll write it as, so this is a lemma known as proved independently by multiple people. It's what is known as the De Mello, Lipton, Schwartz, Zippel lemma. Okay. The lemma is basically this algorithm. Okay, I'll just write it down formally, but lemma is basically the algorithm that we saw. Okay, what it says is that if P x1, x2 up till xn is not identically 0, is a non-zero, maybe I'll write it that, is a non-zero polynomial of degree at most d. Okay. Then the probability that if you choose a1, a2 up till an independently and with replacement from a set S, okay, then the probability that P of a1, a2 and so on till an is equal to 0, okay, is at most d divided by cardinality S. Right? So this is the statement. Okay, take a non-zero polynomial of degree d, degree less than or equal to d. Okay, then if you choose these points here, okay, so this is chosen uniformly at random with replacement, right? Which means that you pick a1, then you whatever is the value you'll say sample again from the set S, right, from the whole set S. It's not that you will, if you choose an element, you will say that no, I'll sample from the remaining elements, but you sample from the whole set once again. That's what it means to say sampling with replacement. Okay? Then the probability is at most d over cardinality S. Okay, this is basically the statement of the algorithm, right? This is exactly the algorithm that we wrote down. Correct? And if you notice, the univariate case is a special case of this, right? What is the univariate case? So univariate case is basically telling you that, okay, no, so sorry, the univariate case is the fundamental theorem of algebra that we saw. Follows from the fundamental theorem. Right? Because P has at most d roots, and therefore, this is going to happen, right? So if you take just P of x1, then the probability, then the number of, so if you have P of x, then the number of roots is at most d, right? So the univariate case follows directly from the fundamental theorem of algebra. And what we are interested in is in the multivariate case. Okay. And the proof is a proof by induction. The proof is going to be by induction on n. Okay. So this is what we are going to do next. But so while doing this proof, we'll actually develop we'll recall some basic, the basics of discrete probability that you've already seen before. It might be a little boring, but then we'll just anyway recall it so that we are all in the same page, the in equal footing. Okay. So before we get into that, what does it mean to analyze a randomized algorithm, right? So you have let's go back to this randomized algorithm that we wrote here. What does it mean to say that you're going to analyze a randomized algorithm, right? So typically what happens is that in the case of a randomized algorithm, the algorithm is going to make some random choices, right? At every step, its next step depends on the random choices it makes as well as the current state of the algorithm, right? Therefore, you can have variables. There are variables in this algorithm that will depend on the random choices that you make. Okay. So these variables that depend on the random choices that you make, these are what are called random variables. Okay, this is not, so we'll formally define what a random variable is. Maybe you know what is a random variable. You have seen it in your basic probability course. But in a randomized algorithm, so there are some quantities that will depend on the choice of depend on the random choices that you make. Okay, and analyze. So these are the random variables of the algorithm. And analyzing a randomized algorithm is basically trying to understand the behavior of these random variables. Right? For instance, if you take quicksort, right, the random variable there is the running time of the algorithm. Right? The running time of the algorithm varies depending on the random choices that you make. The random choices that you make for quicksort is the choice of your pivot. And so analyzing quicksort would mean analyzing the random variable, which is the number of comparisons or the running time of the algorithm. So analyzing a randomized algorithm would amount to understanding, finding out what is the random variable that is of interest to us, and analyzing the random variable's properties. Okay, what is the probability that the random variable will take a certain value? What is the probability that it will take a different value, and so on. Okay, so given a randomized algorithm, so a randomized algorithm defines a random process, right? Corresponding to the random process, there are some random variables. And our job is to understand these random variables clearly, understand all its properties, maybe what its expectation, what is its variance, how much does it deviate from the expectation, and so on. Okay. So the randomized algorithm is written as a say as a, it's probably, if you've studied probability theory, I mean the basic probability, the random variables are actually defined directly for you, right? You will say that here is a random variable that is distributed according to such and such a thing, and so on, right? Whereas here the random variables are implicitly defined by your algorithm. Okay, so you have an algorithm which is implicitly defining the random variables. Your job is to actually understand what these random variables are and try to understand the properties of these random variables, right? What values do they take? What is the probability that it will take certain values, and so on. And that is what we are going to do when we actually analyze this algorithm, right? So here, the random variables are basically the set of values a1, a2 up till an gets when you sample, right? And we are interested in the event, or in the we were interested in the event that this actually, for these set of values, the p evaluates to 0. Okay? So we want to understand the behavior of these random variables, and that is what we are going to do, right? So in the first case, we will actually be very, very explicit. We will actually define what is a probability space corresponding to a randomized algorithm, what is the event of interest, and so on. We'll write it down explicitly and calculate everything. But then as we go along, we will not write everything from such first principles, but we will assume that we know what is happening, and it will be implicit in the analysis that we do. But the take home message is that given a randomized algorithm, there is a random variable that is of interest that defines the behavior of the algorithm. And our job in analyzing the algorithm is to understand the behavior of that random variable, right? And what we are going to see is, there is a design part of coming up with the randomized algorithm, right? The other important part is the tools to analyze the random variables. In some cases, for instance, in the algorithm that you're seeing here, the random variable is fairly simple. I mean, this algorithm is a fairly simple algorithm, and it's fairly straightforward to understand the random variable and analyze it. But in some cases, the random variables can be very complicated, right? It might be that you have multiple random variables, there are multiple random choices that you make, and finally you take some function of these different choices to obtain the final answer, and so on, right? So the other aim of this course is a set of techniques and tools to study these random variables, right? Study a way to analyze complicated random variables that might arise in the analysis of randomized algorithms. Okay? And this is what we are going to do in the next lecture. So we'll very carefully go over the analysis of this PIT algorithm while developing the tools, basic tools of discrete probability. Okay? So that we will do in the tomorrow's lecture. Okay, so that's all for now. Any questions? So one other thing is there are a lot more people than in this call than what I have in my list. So if you are regularly going to come, it's better that you email me and I can add you to the list, because otherwise I have to keep letting you in, right? Because that I'll have to keep doing it. So just let me know if you're going to come regularly, in which case I can add you to the list and you can automatically enter the call without having me to admit you in. Okay, so please let me know about that. Okay, yeah, thanks. So I think the lecture is done. Yeah, thank you.